So I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about tonight. This is for a lot of you listening and for my humble audience member. This is the first time I think you guys have heard me teach directly on this. I did teach on this on our Tuesday night partner meeting recently. We're going to have a lot more to come, but we are hosting a conference here in Searcy, Arkansas, July 25th and 26th. It's a Saturday and Sunday. And I'm really excited about that because I am going to be teaching you guys what is the key to overcoming all of your internal mental struggles as well as relational issues. And the Lord has given me this information and revelation and knowledge, and it has just been absolutely life transforming every time I've taught on this and every time I've brought it to a counseling session or anything that I do, even in my personal life. This has just been such a transformational teaching. So this is the first of this kind of series that I'm starting with you guys and here in our church. Again, we are in Searcy, Arkansas. It's 1921 West Beebe Caps, and we would love to have you. Our services are going to be 10:30 on Sunday mornings, and we'll do some random type of worship. Meaning it may be via the sound speakers, it may be Robin and I leading, it may be piano. We'll just go with the flow of the Holy Spirit. But the very first thing we do is connect with God. And honestly, if I never said a word, that would be more than enough. Because just spending time in worship fixes all of your, most immediate issues that you may emotionally, spiritually be dealing with. When we come to God, He puts us in that place of peace that surpasses understanding, and it just makes everything manageable. Sometimes when you're in an argument with the person that's closest to you, like a spouse or maybe your best friend, it just feels like the world is really rocky. And the good thing about being able to come back to God is that when we connect with Him, everything seems to make sense, everything has a calm about it, and a peace takes over. And really, the power of connection is the most important thing that you could ever learn. If you learn nothing else from us, if you leave our ministry, if you stop watching videos, this series that I'm about to do is the most important thing that I want you to take away from everything that we do. So this is called Reframing Depression, Grief, and Leading on the Pathway to Healing Through Reattachment. So before we talk about healing, though, we need to redefine what many people think of as a weakness. Depression is often treated like laziness, lack of faith, emotional instability, weakness, and failure to just move on. And grief is often treated like something to rush through, something inconvenient to where you're at right now, or something people should hide if they're strong. But what if many people are not actually failing spiritually? What if they're just disconnected relationally, emotionally, neurologically, and spiritually? What if depression is not always simply just a chemical issue, but sometimes it's the result of prolonged disconnection, and I would venture to say almost all the time. Unresolved grief, emotional isolation, chronic stress, fear, shame, or just simple nervous system exhaustion. And what if grieving people do not primarily need you to fix them? Lectures, pressure from the world, or spiritual cliches, but instead they need safe, present, and attuned connection. This goes for all of us, actually. This is not just for depression and grief, but I wanted to mention those because they are a big factor in this. There are a lot of people that we get the honor to lead who are going through these things, but then we lead people who are going to lead people through and out of depression. And I meet with so many people who don't know how to connect to someone that is struggling internally, or they don't know how to help them when they're emotionally unstable. And this can be consistently, or it can be just during a crisis time, but I'm going to give you a little bit of insight as to how to do that today. But attachment literally changes everything that we have talked about. Connection is not a luxury. Connection is not emotional weakness, and it is not secondary. Connection is absolutely part of how God designed human beings to survive, heal, to regulate, grow, and recover. Without healthy connection, the nervous system destabilizes. The mind becomes overwhelmed, emotions become dysregulated, hope decreases, clarity decreases, and despair increases. And eventually, many people feel numb or they stop feeling really alive. And that is so sad, because Christ died so that we could have life in abundance to the full until it overflows. And what's even more sad about that is people who are struggling with dysregulated emotions tend to push people away the moment they start to connect out of fear of abandonment. And this is all of us. Every single one of us, every single one of you listening has a trigger that tries to push you out of disconnection, because that was the attack of us back when, even with Adam and Eve. And I think what's beautiful, and I've shared this multiple times now, is God did not create Eve to solve a problem that had existed already. God created Eve and said, "It is good for man not to be alone." This was before any of the problems had occurred that would occur. And so at the very foundational level, it is not good for you to be alone. And if you're alone today, I pray that maybe the Lord would lead you to us, or that the Lord would put people in your life to surround you and be there for you consistently, just to be a friend, just to have fun, but also to be there for you during difficult times. And I just want to tell you this. There's a lot of people who feel like a burden, and you've been told you're a burden. I've been told that. We've been told that we're too much to handle. I've even, heard people say, well, you need a psychologist. You need a counselor's counselor. You need more than what I can help you with. You're too much for me to handle. And you know what? That's not necessarily a lie. Sometimes we are, because people don't have the knowledge that we need to really heal and move forward, so they have to pass us on to someone more knowledgeable. But that does not mean that you're a failure. That does not mean that you are lesser than, or that you're broken, because that's what Satan would like us to feel, is that we're completely broken. But I'm here to tell you today, the answer is simply just connection. God designed humans for connection. We begin with God, because attachment is not merely psychological or sociological, it's theological. God himself exists in relationship. Genesis 1:26 says, "Let us make man in our image." Before humans ever existed, there was relationship. There was communion, there was connection, and there was unity. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. This means relationship existed even before creation. So when humans disconnect deeply from God, others, or even disconnect from yourself, you begin functioning outside of the design that God had created you for. Isolation is a tool of the enemy to try to bring us disconnected. Isolation is very dangerous spiritually. Genesis 2:18 is what I had just mentioned. It is not good for man to be alone. Notice, God did not say it is uncomfortable for a man to be alone. It is less enjoyable. It is mildly unhealthy. But he said, it is not good for a man to be alone. Why? Because of isolation. Isolation affects emotional regulation, mental clarity, physical health. Yes, definitely affects physical health. Your spiritual endurance and the resilience that you create towards life circumstances, and it affects your hope. Disconnection, however, weakens people. Let's look at the story of Elijah. It says he was depressed after a spiritual victory. One of the clearest biblical examples of nervous system collapse and emotional exhaustion is Elijah. After calling down fire from heaven, after a massive spiritual victory, Elijah crashes emotionally. He runs into the wilderness and says, "It is enough. Now, O Lord, take my life away." This is in 1 Kings 19, verse 4. Notice what God does not do first when he cries out to him. God does not shame him, rebuke him harshly, call him weak, or lecture him. This is where we have to be really careful, because I hear people in church, especially with those that struggle with suicide, I hear people in the church saying, well, you just don't know your purpose. And I understand that. I personally have ministered to so many suicidal people that I've lost count. I used to be a responder, and I worked with the police department to go with them to calls of people who were in the act of committing suicide. And I worked with so many people, and I know for a fact that they need connection. The number one thing you're trained for in suicide response is bringing them to a point of connection with something or someone that they can fight for, and that their life is worth living for. And then we can get them out of this crisis mode and bring them back into a place of knowing their purpose. I even had someone say that this person was suicidal because they were weak and not manly. And if that's the case, please don't counsel this person and look into counseling so that you can get guidance on how to help. You may have a calling to help people going through things like this, but definitely need more education, because if that was said to that person, that would destroy them even worse. What happens when we're depressed or suicidal is Satan tells us everything about ourselves, and we start to believe it because we disconnected from ourselves. So if you're hearing thoughts in your head that you're starting to slowly agree with, or maybe you're already in full agreement that you're worthless, that you're not enough, that, fill in the blank, not pretty enough, smart enough, handsome enough, funny enough, talented enough, I don't teach enough, I don't do enough for God, I don't have enough money, whatever it is, those are all lies of the devil. And as soon as you start believing anything about your identity, one thing Satan would always say to me is, why would they want to be with you? Just why? Why would they want to be with you? And so when we hear those things from the devil, we know we need to have our sensors on that say, alert, the devil is trying to get you into a place of isolation and disconnection, because if you don't believe that you're worthy of love and belonging, you will not allow other people to make you feel like you're worthy of love and belonging. And we'll kind of touch on that, but that is really for our conference, and for other teachings I'll do. So definitely like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of these further teachings, and then email me, brandy@firesidegrace.com, to figure out how to sign up for our conference. Okay, so God doesn't lecture him, call him weak, rebuke him harshly, blah, blah. Instead, God restores his connection and helps him back into regulation. God gave him rest, food, his presence, gentleness and response, and quietness. Okay? Then the truth comes afterward. This is absolutely critical. God understood that an exhausted nervous system cannot process information clearly. And that's, again, we get into the science behind that in the conference. Jesus in grief. Jesus himself wept at Lazarus' tomb. He loved Lazarus. Even knowing the resurrection was coming, Jesus still entered grief regarding relationships. Why? Because grief is not weakness. It's a natural result to a deep connection. Grief is the evidence of attachment. You only grieve deeply what you love deeply, and God honors and respects that, and he does the same thing. Now, we need to understand something powerful. Depression and grief are not identical, but they overlap neurologically, emotionally, and relationally. Both issues involve some type of loss, being overwhelmed, strain on your nervous system, emotional exhaustion, which results in disconnection because you're too tired to connect, hopelessness, and reduced regulation in facing other things of your life during that time. People often describe depression as numbness, exhaustion, emptiness, hopelessness, negativity, being critical, disconnection, lack of motivation, feeling emotionally shut down, and feeling alone even when you're in a crowded room. Why? Because prolonged stress and disconnection overwhelm your nervous system, thus allowing anxiety to set in. When people live too long in fear, rejection, emotional isolation, shame, survival mode, or unresolved grief, the nervous system eventually says, I cannot sustain this level of distress anymore. We were never made to live there. And many people collapse internally. But this is where you come in. And this is where you get to be the body of Christ to someone around you. Grief impacts sleep, appetite, connection, concentration, memory function, immune health, your stress hormones, and nervous system regulation. The brain interprets deep relational loss as danger. Why? Because attachment bonds are biologically powerful. When someone loses a spouse, a child, a parent, a close relationship, even a dream that you may have had, your identity, or who you believed someone to be, and all of a sudden they've changed. A sense of safety. When you've lost that sense of safety, the nervous system experiences rupture. And this is what we just taught on In Search of Wisdom for this past week's episode was, and that's on Peace-Filled, the Peace-Filled Life with Fireside Grace YouTube channel. We taught that the nervous system does not know the difference between physical harm and relational harm. It cannot tell the difference. So literally, you think about being in a car wreck or getting hit or, whatever type of physical, breaking a bone or whatever, the physical trauma, the body responds the exact same way to relational trauma as it responds to physical trauma. I'm going to take a drink. Okay. That's why grieving people often say, I don't feel like myself, I feel lost, I can't think clearly, I feel numb, I feel disconnected, or I feel like an emotional roller coaster. Because attachment disrupts and affects the whole person. One of the biggest misunderstandings is that people try to help depressed or grieving individuals by giving logic, solutions, correction, information, but overwhelmed brains do not heal through pressure. When the nervous system feels overwhelmed, your body cortisol increases, survival systems activate, emotional regulation decreases, and hopelessness increases, and the brain becomes focused on surviving, not processing truth and thinking through problems critically. Doesn't think about long-term planning or emotional integration. We haven't got there yet. We're not at that point. That is why many depressed people why many depressed people know truth intellectually, but cannot emotionally access their place of peace and connection with God or others. This is a really big key because the brain can receive information, but we don't necessarily process it and put it into practice if we're not connected to someone when we receive that information. So if you receive information from someone that you don't have that connection with and that you don't see that play out in their lives, which is why I really want you guys to come here and we can all be a big happy family, because then we can do life together as much as possible and be able to grow from each other, and iron sharpens iron, because whenever we receive information, we can become a double-minded Christian if it's not backed by connection. And that's why I really struggle with us having an international ministry. I love that. I'm more thankful than anything for that, but I am such a people person. I want to hug you, squeeze you, love you, and just make you feel the presence of God wherever I am. And I can do that through this, and we are so effective through this, praise God, but it's still not face-to-face. But for whatever it's worth, I see you, and I'm praying for you, and you feel free to reach out to me so that we can connect via Zoom or something like that if you're a monthly partner. But it's why it's so important. If you're struggling with a double-minded Christianity, it literally usually is simply because, not because you're just being rebellious. Yes, if you're double-minded on purpose, you are being rebellious, but what fixes that? It's not just a decision, because if it was simply a decision, then the drug addict would always be able to get free immediately. the alcoholic would be free. The porn addicted person would be able to drop it because they heard they're not supposed to do it, and then they just stop doing it because it's not what they were supposed to do. Unfortunately, that's not the reality of how God created us. And so this is why you can go to different churches and see that they have, maybe a larger majority of a certain church has people walking in the world, like 1 foot in the world and 1 foot in the church. Thankfully, members that we have, most are not like that because we focus on discipleship. And so we disciple through love. And when you really take time to connect and disciple, then you pull people out of that. But the problem with the church is that the leaders are so strained and they grow so quickly and they have so many members first of all, the pastor thinks that they're the end all be all. And so, you have to do every single role in the church. And when you do every single role, you don't get to be the person that you're supposed to be to people as the pastor. And so that gets really unhealthy really fast. And they don't think they can do anything about it because they're constantly busy or whatever, but that's the problem. Busy can become a cuss word, honestly. And so if you take time as a pastor or, as a church to connect to each other, because we're all called to be leaders, and the Bible says that don't take titles for yourself. It says to call yourselves brothers and sisters. That's why you don't hear Apostle Brandy Cunningham's ministry or Teacher Prophet Robin Cunningham's ministry, Fireside Grace. We chose the name Fireside Grace because we didn't want to have the ministry known for Robin and I. We wanted it to be able to be carried on without our names being attached because we're only here for a certain amount of time. So we don't live life like that. And so when you can drop your title and you can be present with people who are going through really hard things, this is where I really struggle with the church. There's a lot of pastors who are quick to say, well, I have discernment and I can tell that person is operating in a Jezebelic spirit, or I can tell that this person is operating in manipulation. I don't give 2 cents about what your discernment says if you don't have the knowledge and compassion and desire to help them through it. I don't care at all what your discernment is. And the issue is when pastors or whoever leaders think they can call out these things and then not help people through that, because the only way out of this and those type of behaviors, that's just the fruit of the problem, but the root of the problem is disconnection. So your job as a pastor is to connect and help pull them out of that. And that's all I'm going to say about it. I'm going to leave that there so I can move forward. Okay. Obviously, you can tell I am passionate about that. And if you're a pastor that wants to know more about that, please attend our conference that we're having in July. But also, I wrote a book called Expel the Jezebel in Me. Rob and I wrote that book. And that's a 30-day devotional geared towards leaders to help lead groups or individuals that just want to get free of any type of self-sabotaging behaviors. And it's a 30-day Bible study and journal into getting free from this, okay? It's based off of the verse that David says, create in me a clean heart, O Lord. And so you can get that on our website, firesidegrace.com/shop, or on Peace Filled Designs on Etsy, or just email us or whatever, and we'll get it to you. Or you can come see me and I'll get it to you. Okay. Let's see. Nervous system needs safety before clarity. People do not simply heal because they hear truth. They heal when truth enters a regulated, connected nervous system. This changes how we do ministry completely, because suddenly presence matters, tone matters, gentleness matters, pacing of how you say things matter, and safety matters. Jesus was really good and understood this. One of the greatest mistakes people make around grieving, depressed, or otherwise either acutely or long-termly unstable individuals is trying to rush them out of resolution or rush them through the resolution. But attachment-based healing says, I can be your presence before I put pressure on you. Now, sometimes there is a time to put pressure and there's a time to help people move forward, but Jesus helps you discern when and how to do that. A lot of people want to be the office of the prophet or have the redemptive gift of prophet, but they don't want the redemptive gift of mercy. And let me tell you something, a prophet without a mercy gifting is a dangerous person that I'm not sure that I really want to be around. So it's really important that we take the time to develop mercy. If you're someone who struggles with mercy and compassion, Pray that the Lord gives you his heart for every circumstance going on in your life, because when he does that, it will radically change how you minister to other people. Job's friends were the most helpful when they sat with him, mourned with him, stayed present silently beside him. But at some point they became harmful when they over-explained, accused him, or tried to force meaning prematurely. Sometimes people do not need quick answers, spiritual performance, or fixing. Sometimes all they need is someone willing to stay. And I know there are people out here listening to this that will agree with that. There's all been times in our lives where we just needed someone to stay and not try to fix us and just let us be who we are and what we're going through at that time. That is really hard too if you're a leader, to feel free enough to do that, because leaders naturally want to give, and hopefully you don't have an image that you try to keep up, but it can be harder when you know someone's going through something, but you are too, so you try not to express what you're going through. But if it actually typically works better for connection if people know what you're going through as well, so that you can both feel like you're balanced in the relationship, giving and taking. Okay, that goes for leaders too. It doesn't just go for for people who aren't in leadership. Okay, why disconnection intensifies things like negative behaviors? Humans are designed for co-regulation. This means our nervous system calms through safe connection. Robin just talked about a study that came out, which most of us moms who have studied co-sleeping and things like that already know this, but there's a study out there, obviously, that proves that babies, when they're left to cry it out, they actually don't stop because they've learned not to cry it out. They stop because they've completely lost hope that the person they trust the most is going to help them. And so co-regulation starts immediately at birth. You think a lot of babies can only see so far when they're born. And so they rely so much on feeling that attachment to their parents. It's the same with puppies. It's the same with, it all starts in the beginning of life, right? So we calm through safe connection. We were never created to grow out of this. And if you were pushed away and you had to learn on your own, I understand, and I'm sorry that you're going through that. Healthy connection can help regulate your breathing, your stress hormones, emotional instability or emotional overwhelmness, your literal heart rate, your response to fear. However, on the other side of that, isolation intensifies dysregulation. This is why prolonged loneliness strongly correlates with depression, anxiety, hopelessness, and emotional dysregulation, and it can have the fruit of those unwanted behaviors similar to what narcissists can have, or what people that are operating in Jezebelic fruit can have: manipulation behaviors, control behaviors, avoidance behaviors, the Ahab behaviors also. Disconnection tells the nervous system, again, you are in danger, but connection tells your body, you are not carrying this alone, and therefore you can literally return someone to safety that quick. Healing is not forcing someone to be positive, and I don't know how many times I could say that in a row and not get tired of it. Healing looks like listening without rushing someone, and this is why the medical field doesn't really work, how it's set up, okay? Listening without rushing, staying emotionally present, slowing down, validating someone's pain without surrendering hope. I know that you went through a really difficult stroke and it's affected every area of your life, but I would focus then on the difference that they could make that day, and that brings hope. But hey, my lab levels have gotten drastically better after 9 months, and that gave me hope. And that's the one little decision at a time, being able to see. And you can actually ask God to pray. You can pray and ask God to show the person that's going through something how their roots are being developed in God during this time. Because the deeper your root system, the higher your fruit can go, right? The more fruit that the tree and whatever can hold. So help someone regulate safely, sitting with grief instead of fearing it. offering a steady presence over performance. The perfect examples of attachment-based ministries, we can look at Jesus. He touched lepers. He stayed with the grieving. He wept with mourners. He asked questions. He slowed down, and allowed himself to be inconvenienced for people. Do you slow down? Do you allow yourself to be inconvenienced and walk out of the middle of what you're focused on to help someone where they're at? There is a time to stay focused, and there's a time to allow yourself to be inconvenienced. He noticed people's emotional pain. He didn't walk away from them because it made him uncomfortable, okay? He's not uncomfortable with your emotions. And he restored people's belonging, even the people who were shunned the most from the community. That is what being a Christian looks like. He didn't preach at people's pain. He entered into it with them. Depression and grief or other fragmentation will affect you internally. You may see emotional overwhelm, shutdown, numbness, pain, panic, hopelessness, confusion, and inability to think clearly. Moving through this quickly because I think everyone's getting tired and I just kind of regurgitated that. The brain is not functioning as an integrated whole, but what does becoming whole and integrated look like? Healing begins when emotion is acknowledged, safety is restored, truth is introduced very gently, and the nervous system starts to calm. Connection becomes consistent. I work with a bunch of people who have dysregulated nervous systems, okay? Even if we're not talking about the emotional side of things, if we're just talking about physically, nervous system, emotionally dysregulated people. And that's really where the pathway to peace was birthed from, because in connection, we have to have nurturing. And it's the nurturing that pulls you out of this place of survival and into a place of peace. You can get the pathway to transcendent peace and learn all about that, how to do that, the peace analysis, and how to implement it in your life and truly reformat your brain, because you have what's called neuroplasticity in your brain, and you can rebuild pathways in your brain. And so I've taught you how to do that, to go back to a place of peace in the pathway to peace. This is taking it to the next level, well, 2 levels deeper, because in the next is the series Deprogrammed I did, and then comes in this, okay? Deprogrammed is on the Fireside Grace YouTube. It has its own playlist. You can watch the whole series, okay? Nervous system calms, connection becomes consistent, and this allows your right brain, which is the emotional attachment side of your brain, and your left brain, which is your logical reasoning side of your brain, to begin to work together again, and that's when good decisions can become made again. Wholeness is not becoming emotionless. Wholeness is learning to stay connected to truth while feeling it deeply without feeling the need to run. We can slow down, we remove people's shame, we help them name what they feel, we stay consistent, we don't force resolution, we don't call out the things they're doing wrong, and we bring truth to them gently when God tells us it's proper time and how to deliver that. That's all after they've calmed down and connected and moved forward. Depression is not always rebellion. Sometimes it's exhaustion, grief, isolation, overwhelm, and nervous system collapse. I would say this is true with addiction as well. Grief is not weakness, it's love carrying the loss. People do not heal because they are pressured, they heal because they are safely connected. Connection is not soft. Connection is rare and sacred, and that's what makes us an effective remnant kingdom in these last days. Every time you slow down and stay present, you listen gently, and you regulate your own nervous system, and you choose connection over being efficient with what you're doing, you are doing more than comforting someone. You are helping calm their nervous system, which builds their immune system, restore their hope, rebuild their trust, and God knows most of us all need our trust rebuilt. Reintegrating fragmented emotions, reconnecting them to relationships, reconnecting them to themselves, and ultimately bringing them hope again, reconnecting them to God. Because attachment heals, it's better than any drug. And healthy connection is one of the most powerful environments that God created for restoration. In the next episode, we'll talk about the way back into connection and returning from disconnection, depression, internal isolation, or emotional overwhelm. I look forward to seeing you then. Bye-bye.